Good afternoon or morning, depending on where you're watching the show from today. We're trying a little bit of a different time slot here on our channel. Going to be drafting another Ball Mania 5 team here on Underdog Fantasy. I'm your host today, Chris, joined like usual by Chuck. Chuck, how are you this morning?
I'm doing great. Coming off game three of the NBA Finals. Game three was good. Unfortunately, we probably only have one more game in the NBA season tomorrow. Game four. Maybe the Mavericks will surprise us and let us get a game five. But either way, I already mentioned I'm already full on in best ball summer, so we're ready to go.
We got a couple of new contests that dropped within the last 24 hours that are still available anyway. We have the 3 Max Dalmatian here, $101, hence Dalmatian, right? To enter. Seems like a pretty interesting format, Chuck. And then literally just announced, like right before we started the show, we have a nice $12 3-entry max Superflex contest with $20,000 up top, the Pug, but Superflex. So not just Ball Mania 5 as we talk about night in, day out. There are plenty of options for the 2024 NFL season here on Underdog. And man, I think there was a $3 contest that posted within the last, I think it was yesterday, right? The mini Schnauzer that is already full. This was a 37,000 entrant field, and this contest is already unavailable to enter. It is absolutely insane what Underdog has been able to build over the last few years here, Chuck, because the people just cannot stop entering all these contests.
Yeah, I was telling Chris before the stream started. I didn't even know about this contest until after the game yesterday, and by then it was already full. I couldn't find it in the lobby. Like, it's insane.
So we're going to do the flagship Ball Mania 5 here. Technical difficulties per usual. Let me reboot the browser. This has happened a couple of times on the stream for me. Not a problem. Chuck, as we get ready to enter another contest, you mentioned to me before we went live on the show here that you actually do have a couple of players I think we haven't talked about, at least in a few shows, that you wanted to discuss this afternoon or this morning for you. Who's one of those guys? Maybe we can kind of get the ball rolling on that as I try to navigate what's going on here with my location verification.
Well, knowing me, I've definitely mentioned these players probably a few times on stream, but Hayden Hurst is the guy who has kind of like popped into ADPs who didn't have an ADP a week ago. I've seen him mentioned a couple times on Twitter. I started taking him a few days ago, and on one of the other sites, he's even above like Tucker Kraft and a couple of those back end tight ends. So he's definitely moving up. And then Braylon Allen, we've definitely mentioned. He's up 18 spots in ADP from 207 to 189, which isn't that significant. You can still grab him basically in almost the last round, but like I mentioned, like Twitter hype is pretty powerful, and that's a guy that I've been adding to.
Couple of other players that have finally flashed with an ADP, just looking at the ADP tracker here over the last 7 days on OccupyFantasy.com. John Mechie with the Houston Texans, obviously kind of buried on the depth chart even more this year than he was last year. But McCole Hardman, that's kind of interesting, Chuck. Obviously like a free 18th round pick, but rejoining the Kansas City Chiefs wide receiver room. We're always interested in pieces with Kansas City, excuse me. On the other side of the risers here, we have Demario Douglas as well with the Patriots. I think having a really strong OTA camp period with New England, he has risen by about 6 spots. And the Christian McCaffrey handcuff, if you will, Elijah Mitchell seems to be somewhat moving up the boards as well. So, but admittedly, only been a couple of days since we did our last draft show together, and there just aren't like a tremendous amount of changes from that here.
I have been clicking Elijah Mitchell as like my 6th, 7th running back sometimes, and we mentioned Joshua Palmer. He's up 5 spots to 114. I expect that to keep going. Bucky Irving's up, Ty Chandler's up, Rashee Rice is up. So I wonder if it kind of hit the point where he hit his floor, and now people are gonna start being interested. I've been clicking on him recently, but it's kind of just hoping he only gets suspended for like 4 games, and this ends up being a value at his ADP.
7th round pick, up 4 spots, to the low 70s now by ADP, but certainly I think worth the risk. You're at a point where if you draft the way that we advocate for, he's probably your 3rd or 4th receiver by that point in the contest, right? So most of the time anyway. So you're just purely chasing ceiling. And I mean, we certainly saw that with Rice in the second half of the season and the postseason last year. We have landed in a draft room. We have the 8th overall pick on this board. So pretty similar spot to to Tuesday evening show that we did together, Chuck. I believe I had the 9th pick in that war room. This means I'm probably going to be a little closer to getting that Bijan Robinson, Brees Hall range, at the top of the board here in the first round. And as we talked about on the last show, you have come around a little bit more on Bijan. So unless we get like a screaming value with those top 5 receivers falling, I think I'm probably going to go that route and get one of these running backs. Hopefully, Bijan about a pick behind his ADP. That's kind of my initial thought. And it looks like we have a pretty good room here. I have one red badge in here in the early morning for you over on the West Coast, about lunchtime here for me on the East Coast. So we'll see how this one shakes out.
Man, I love seeing the lack of badges in the room. I don't usually draft this early. I might have to start mixing some of these morning sessions in.
Tyreek over CD Lamb. I mean, I certainly don't hate it, but definitely don't see that happening that often this season.
No, we do not.
All right. So Amon-Ra would be the player that I would want to fall to me at 8 here. Obviously, I wasn't expecting that to happen, and I'm still back at this kind of Puka Nacua, A.J. Brown, Garrett Wilson spot at receiver. Man, I did not get what I wanted. I think I'm over-indexed on A.J. Brown by a significant amount here, and it just does still feel pretty gross to me to get Puka, Garrett Wilson, but I think I have to force myself to get a little different here, and I'm going to go with Garrett Wilson tonight because I'm going to have to force myself, Chuck, to get exposure to these top Jets. I already have a little bit of exposure to Brees Hall, who was obviously sitting right here as well, but I've only got a pretty light portfolio at this point. I've probably only drafted about 10 to 12 teams in total, all on the channel here, by the way, and I have not yet selected Garrett Wilson, so happy to kind of mix him in here.
So I've been drafting a bunch of Jets. I have been somewhat, I don't want to say nervous, but I've had Aaron Rodgers on my mind. And didn't he skip OTAs, like not excused?
Not excused. I think Robert Saleh put a quote out there that they knew he wasn't going to be there. So like he had informed them, but all that basically means is he's receiving like the requisite required NFL fine for not attending. And frankly, at his compensation level, we know that Aaron Rodgers is not worried about that at all. So we're still in June here. I have a feeling that when training camp opens, Rodgers will be there for all of the quote unquote important workouts. So I'm not like tremendously nervous about him at all because he skipped a June workout period, if that makes sense. It's just not on my radar to really worry about that right now. A little bit of a receiver run here. Kind of interesting. Jahmyr Gibbs flipping Brees Hall. Little bit of a slide for Brees Hall to pick 11 there. Haven't yet seen that in any of the rooms I've personally been in, but that certainly jumped out to me as something to be aware of. Got incentive to stack the Buffalo Bills in Week 17, the Rams in Week 16, and the Jacksonville Jaguars in Week 15 with Garrett Wilson here as Drake London comes off the board. Feels like it's a little early for me to be considering this kind of Kyron Williams correlation with Garrett Wilson. So I think I'm just going to go with my favorite receiver left here, Brandon Ayuk, and just kind of worry about Rams correlation a little later on with Cooper Kupp or some of the other options that are still available.
I mentioned I feel like Rashee Rice kind of hit a floor with his ADP, and I wonder if it's the same deal with Kyron because it feels like he's going back closer to that 2-3 turn where last week he was going closer to the end of the 3rd round in most of my drafts. I've been clicking on him basically every time. If he was there where you're drafting right now, it's pretty much a snap pick for me right now.
And didn't really actively think about this, but kind of nice to take a 49er because we know they're going to be good again. But we also have Rams correlation with the Niners in Week 15. So I have double incentive now to get some Rams correlation with my top 2 players on this roster in the playoff weeks.
This is like 13, 14 rounds away, but have you been tacking on Demarcus Robinson at the end of drafts at all, or are you interested in doing that?
I've taken him as a last round draft pick a couple times here on Underdog. Really no dramatic changes to personnel at pass catcher for the Rams this offseason so far anyway, right? And we saw DeMarcus come on really, really strong at the end of the season, so it stands to reason that he's still going to have a similar role here with Matthew Stafford under center, probably the clear number 3 receiver. And probably more importantly, right, if Tyler Higbee's going to miss some time, maybe they do, in fact, lean more on that third receiver instead of the tight end, at least to begin the season.
Yeah, the Rams have been one of the only teams where I've taken tight ends on the Rams a couple times, but they seem like one of the more difficult teams to try to figure out right now. So I can get my Rams tight ends in like August.
I think Davis Allen is the one we've talked about a couple of times behind Higbee. Speaking of tight ends, players that admittedly we'll probably be more concerned about in about 40 minutes on this particular show. You had mentioned Hayden Hurst to me before we went live. What did you want to talk about there with Mr. Hurst on the
Uh,
other LA team, I believe?
I mean, this is just Twitter smoke, right? But something about he had a good rapport with Justin Herbert in practice, and so my mind just went to, all right, this guy's going to score touchdowns this season, and I'm kind of
Yeah.
sick of clicking on everyone that I'm clicking on at the end of the tight end list. So just happy to have a new face in there. I already have like 10%. I've done a bunch of drafts the past few days, so
I think I talked about it with Brian on a recent show. The only concern I think we really have, and he's got like a full year at this point to get over it, but I believe Hayden Hurst had a pretty serious concussion last year that basically knocked him out of the rest of the season. So I do have to wonder if there's any lingering effects there as far as role is concerned. But if you're just looking for like a red zone threat that can catch a few touchdowns and maybe flash into your lineup at tight end as like a late round pick, I mean, you could certainly do worse, especially if it's a player that Justin Herbert prefers in that offense. Back to the sea of orange here at the top of the board, Chuck, and a phenomenon that you and I have talked about several times. Elite quarterbacks just falling completely out of the first 2.5 rounds seems to be a common theme now in underdog draft rooms. It's just very jarring to me to see quarterbacks like Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts, Lamar Jackson slide as Josh Allen comes off the board here when it feels like they probably should not be going as low as they are now. It seems to have worked out that this just took place for me, though, because now I can actually get Kyron Williams anyway in the third round, slightly behind ADP, and have a really strong Rams correlation in the first two playoff weeks with my two receivers I started with.
Real quick, just back to the Chargers tight ends for a second. I'm not 100% confident he's starting. Obviously, we can't be. They still have Will Dissly and Donald Parham Jr. on the roster. They just paid Will Dissly. I understand he's a good pass catcher, and Donald Parham, another guy I think of, just all he does is catch touchdowns if he's on the field, right? So we're not 100% sure there. But back to your pick, I wanted to ask you about Derrick Henry. Like, should we be a little more? Because it doesn't seem like either of us are that interested in him. Do you think we should start to get there a little bit more, or maybe you are, and I'm not?
I haven't really gotten there with Derrick Henry yet, but I think on the last he comes off, we talked about who are running backs around here that could easily end up being the highest scoring running back in the league. If Baltimore is still an extremely efficient offense, which I think we agree they probably will be, but they skew more towards running back touchdowns in the red zone, keeping Lamar Jackson fresh, using Derrick Henry instead. I mean, in the fourth round here, it's a clear value. Didn't have the correlation reason to necessarily consider it here this afternoon, but I probably agree with you. We need to start clicking on him far more than we currently are. Just going to put my money where my mouth is on this elite quarterback slide and go with the top one on the board here by ADP and by projection for me, Jalen Hurts.
It's curious that the 12 spot took AJ Brown in the first round, and he took Mahomes over Hurts.
He got the Kelsey stack though, so like I see what he was
Okay.
going for,
Okay.
but I think I would have probably preferred to go with Hurts there for sure.
I would have too. Yeah. It's another stack I've been consciously trying to get more of, but specifically with Devonta Smith. His ADP, so he did go 20, was that 26 in this draft? I think his ADP is a little bit closer to 30, but on the other sites, like on Drafters, his ADP last night was like 22.8. Devonta Smith, and that's full PPR, so I kind of understand it, but it still kind of makes me think that he's a little bit undervalued on an underdog. And we've talked about how much we don't love this like group of second tier receivers that are going all around him there. And that's a guy I haven't been clicking on that I kind of want to add a little bit more now.
I probably, if I had thought a little more carefully, I have them close. There was still a low percentage chance anyway that I probably could have paired Jackson with Mark Andrews here in the fifth round. But relative to Jalen Hurts, I think an undervalued weapon in that Eagles offense that no one's clicking on as high as I think they should be. If you're looking outside of this quote unquote elite top 5 tight ends. I mean, Dallas Goedert right around pick 114 right now seems to be a really good way to pair a pass catcher with Jalen Hurts, who has, the superhuman ability like Allen, like Lamar Jackson, to kind of cannibalize all the fantasy scoring on his offense anyway. So even if I don't land Dallas Goedert, Chuck, Hurts is one of these rare QBs I'm actually okay with not even having a stack with.
Yep, same. And I've ran a couple naked, like fully naked Josh Allen stacks, not even with like Dawson Knox in the last round. And I mean, it feels fine. I don't have confidence in any pass catcher in Buffalo.
Yeah. Yeah, of these three guys, Allen definitely in kind of the worst on paper pass catcher situation, at least as far as we can tell on June 13th. That's for sure. Dalton Kincaid coming off, so no real easy Josh Allen stacks coming for Lyle Kittenhouse here. Love the play on words there for sure. Probably going to start filling out receivers again with a little bit of a typical hero running back build with Kyron on my roster. So had some consideration before I took Jalen Hurts with two of those receivers that came off right away, Pickens and Amari Cooper. You and I know, are big fans of Amari Cooper. I'm having a hard time selling myself on George Pickens. I think the only case is really like who else is going to get the ball there, which certainly makes sense. To me, they don't really have exciting pass catchers behind him, but I'm concerned about the efficiency with this Steelers offense. I guess the ADP is fine with Pickens, but he's just another example of a player that I'm really hesitant to click on right now.
I did it, dude. I came around on Pickens. I was out, and I'm kind of in now. I still don't think he's great, but spike weeks are, he's like a overpriced Gabe Davis, right? Want to mix him in a bit.
Overpriced Gabe Davis. I don't know if that's a vote of confidence or not, but
it's not.
Got to make a decision here. And I mean, we saw the ceiling potential, especially late in the season with Jaden Reed. Now entering year 2 with Jordan Love. Happy to get him here in the 5th round. And another option, even though I already have my primary quarterback, I wouldn't be against getting Jordan Love right around pick 100 if he slides like the rest of the quarterbacks, to have a couple of elite quarterbacks on my roster. And I do think, as far as fantasy scoring is concerned, Jordan Love has an opportunity to enter that tier. I have him projected fairly similarly, fantasy points per game, to the player that just came off the board, CJ Stroud. So I'm pretty much going to take that weighted coin flip every single time with Jordan Love right now.
A couple of notes here. I've noticed CJ Stroud start sliding a little bit. I got him at pick 70 yesterday or the day before, which I hadn't seen too much. Luckily, I had a Houston guy. Always have Tank Dell on my roster whenever I can. And then Jordan Love, I would like for him to be my third highest owned quarterback after draft season. I'm pretty sure the top two are going to be Baker Mayfield and Deshaun Watson, just based on their ADPs being so late.
Mm-hmm.
Justin Herbert's actually going to be up there now, but I would love it if Jordan Love was in my top 5 at least. And I think Bo Melton came up in our staff chat yesterday, so we have even another guy that we can backstack with Jordan Love.
I'm a big fan of Bo Melton as like a free pick. Had a pretty strong close to the 2023 NFL season, mostly due to injury related role change, but a player that Matt LaFleur and the Packers showed a lot of confidence in. So we know there is access to a ceiling, and he's free. Probably could double stack the Packers here if I really wanted to as well. Let's see here. Pick 65. A little bit of incentive to get, not right here, but Brandon Cooks, who we talked about on the last show, just for some correlation with the Eagles. Calvin Ridley joining the Titans, I think, is just a massive upgrade for this passing game in Tennessee, Chuck. And I want to make sure I get a ton of exposure to him here. We got Calvin Ridley in like the top, he was like a late second, early third round pick for most of last year with Jacksonville, right? I don't think he's, at least on paper, like any worse than he was last year, maybe in a worse offensive situation as far as the quarterback is concerned. But one of these receivers that feels like a clear value to me here in the 5th, 6th round.
Yeah, and I know you're on Brian Thomas, and he's basically the only rookie I'm drafting in this range. But again, just the rookies are going so much earlier than they used to.
I have not. I think it's just by virtue of where my pick slots have been, as we've seen on the show, like 8th, ninth, 10th. I've had a lot of those. I haven't really taken a lot of Chris Godwin. I'm still interested in him, though. We mentioned Baker Mayfield being one of your favorite quarterbacks. I agree by projection and by cost. But it's interesting that only Evans, relative to last year anyway, has seen the massive ADP jump. Godwin, I think,
Yeah.
was pretty good in fantasy football last year, and his cost, I feel like it's even gone down a little bit, which seems a little annoying, frankly.
Yeah, and it's just everything is working for him. I mean, talking about moving back to the slot, like okay, even if his targets receptions stay the same, he only had 4 touchdowns last year. Pretty bad touchdown. Oh, he only had 2 touchdowns last year, actually. That's like, I mean, I think I forget who he had this conversation with last year. I don't think it was Deontay Johnson, but like, I would definitely take the over on two touchdowns for Chris Godwin.
Speaking of regression, I think I saw. I wish I could remember the source, and I apologize. Maybe I'll run that back and leave it as a comment after the show. But quarterbacks that had kind of the quote unquote best luck in terms of like dropped interceptions on like turnover worthy throws, Baker Mayfield was like one of the highest quarterbacks on that list. So even though
Yeah,
we like Baker's cost around pick 170 right now, that is kind of the harbinger, if you will, that we're waiting to see here is a little bit of regression in terms of interception luck with Baker Mayfield. He got really lucky last year.
I saw that list. Yeah, yeah, it made me. Of course, it made me happy. My highest drafted quarterback got lucky as hell last year.
And I think talked about being some media reporting on Ramondre Stevenson preparing for an every down role for the Patriots. This is not a tremendous reach on him, but I think this is kind of the beginning of watching his ADP sneak back up into the sixth, maybe the fifth round at some point over the next couple of weeks. Because obviously, get a bell cow running back here in, I guess, the beginning of true zero RB territory. He's probably going to end up being a pretty popular pick in this range.
Yeah, it's interesting to see because Aaron Jones is going closer to like pick 60, and we've mentioned like I think it makes sense that he's falling, but I don't know that I've seen Ramondre go ahead of him too much. And then, I mean, we talk about it on every show. I'm taking basically every running back in this range, just mixing it up.
1-1-4 build on the roster here right now. Deontay Johnson from the Carolina Panthers comes off the board. I mean, I like to do things just purely for the sake of kind of what we've talked about on the show sometimes. Rashee Rice, certainly on the board for me. I have incentive really quickly, though, to go with Evan Engram. Week 17 correlation with Calvin Ridley. Week 15 correlation with Garrett Wilson. You have a preference here?
I've been taking Rashee Rice as much as I can, just because I think he's a guy who will rise in ADP, and I don't expect Evan Engram to. I'm pretty down on Evan Engram because I don't think his targets are going to be what they were when Christian Kirk was out, and so like if I'm taking one of these tight ends, I'd rather have like I've usually just been targeting Njoku, I guess, if I don't have a tight end by now.
Yeah, we see kind of Engram right now on the screen for me, Chuck. Just shy of 100 targets 2 seasons ago with Jacksonville. 143 targets last year. You're basically betting he's going to be closer to that 2022 number, and I think I agree, especially with the state of Jacksonville's pass catcher room in general. They just have a lot of talented players there, and if the health is better for the receivers, he's probably the guy that suffers the most. Samir
Yes,
White comes off.
especially your Brian Thomas call. If he
Yeah.
ends up being pretty good, I mean, he could. I don't know. I'm kind of down on Christian Kirk from where I was at the beginning of the summer. Still like him a lot, still taking him, but I am a little more worried than I was before.
And JSN, who just came off at 83, I did kind of skip over him to go to Rashee Rice. I'm just a little hesitant to click on Seahawks players right now. It's probably one of my blind spots on the board. Feel like Geno Smith is not as safe as he has been the last couple of years, and I think that's kind of keeping me off of the roster in general there. But it's probably something I need to correct in my process.
I have not been. Well, I've probably taken Gino a couple times, but it's so hard to click on him because I have no confidence he's starting in Week 17. Like, I'd rather take Sam Howell and Superflex as like my fourth or fifth quarterback, and just hope that I get a massive value there rather than take Geno Smith. There's enough quarterback starts. Like, I'd rather take Bryce Young over Geno Smith. It doesn't seem right, right?
Hmm. Can I take Jonathan Brooks here? Sure. What I want to do, though, is actually get some correlation with the player that I just took. that admittedly I could have had a little earlier on the board had I picked George Pickens. Obviously, I'm teeing myself up here to be super disappointed if Modu does what I don't want him to do, but I am interested in clicking on Jalen Warren to have some correlation in week 17 with Rashee Rice.
Love it. We saw Evan Engram was still on the board for that pick too.
And I just didn't even think about it, right? Like you
I do
kind of
that.
basically
Yeah.
made the case for us to like not even like really worry about it. To your point, I think we'll have our opportunity to select him throughout the rest of the summer here and into the late August, early September kind of mass draft entries that we're all going to do to just kind of jam in the rest of our portfolios with the best information possible. So I'll probably save my Engram exposure for that time on the calendar. I do prefer the tight end that just came off the board just straight up to Evan Engram, I think, and David Njoku.
Same. Yeah.
So Jordan Love comes off. I think I'm going to revisit the first pick I had with Garrett Wilson and maybe just kind of wait for Aaron Rodgers at this point late in the draft. I think that's probably the best way for me to get two quarterbacks in this room, and that works purely because Hurts and Aaron Rodgers have completely different bye weeks. Hurts week 5, the Jets week 12, so that certainly is good as well.
That's one thing I forgot to pay attention to was bye weeks. And so I went back and I have a couple teams where I don't have a position. Like I don't have a tight end or I don't have a quarterback for a week. And it's not that many, but it's funny that I completely forgot to pay attention to it.
It's far less egregious at tight end. I mean, you're probably only costing yourself about 6 to 7 points in equity there, right? But at quarterback, it's tough. Those 20 points that you're sacrificing could be the difference between advancing and losing, right? So we got to make sure we have quarterbacks eligible to play. We got to make sure we're just not taking zeros on purpose. Obviously, injuries are going to happen, and that's out of our control. But we want to control what we can and not take a zero. 1250. This is pick 104.
We're flying today.
We are a little bit of a reach to do this, but I'm just going to lock in the Dallas Goedert stack with Jalen Hurts, and I feel pretty good about that.
That's actually like with exactly Dallas Goedert. This is something I've been doing. It's really important to just lock up that tight end right here.
Cost myself another opportunity to draft the man, the myth, the legend himself, Rashid Shaheed, but another show. We'll get him for sure.
We're going to be taking a bunch of Shaheed by the end of summer.
I was on Brian Robinson pretty heavily before they acquired Alvin Kamara, but I haven't really been able to talk myself into clicking him, and it certainly isn't
Austin Eckler
cost related. Robinson is the player I'm having a hard time selecting.
Well, you said when they acquired Alvin Kamara. Sorry.
Sorry. That's right. I'm just all over the place here. When they acquired Eckler and not Kamara, the Commanders acquiring. Breaking news on the show: Alvin Kamara is now a Commander. No. Back to the point I was trying to make there. Should I be interested in Brian Robinson more than I am, Chuck?
Well, so I was super interested in Brian Robinson before, and I've backed off a little bit, but I still click him as like my RB4. Feels great as a RB4, and I mean, same kind of thing. If he's the guy in week 17, I'm happy with it.
Pick 113. I mean, wide receiver dead zone. Adonai Mitchell, the highest one remaining. I'll jump down to Brandon Cooks here. I know it's a little bit of a reach, but correlation with Jalen Hurts, and just trying to force myself to get a little bit more exposure to non-CeeDee Lamb Dallas Cowboys. And I think we had discussed this being a player who's potentially undervalued right now at pick 125. So even though this is a reach today, by the end of the summer, potentially, this could look like a pretty good pick.
Yeah, it's something like he has a wide range of outcomes. This was a Twitter post I saw last week. Wide range of outcomes, and we don't care when he puts up zeros. We only care when he puts up 17 plus. So, yeah, I've been adding him here as well. Brock Bowers, a guy I thought I was going to draft more, but it's just really hard to click him over some of these running backs in this range.
I have plenty of Ty J. Spears, I think, at this point. Devin Singletary, Trey Benson. So that was kind of another reason I did something different here.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and we've both made the case several times for not being, even though he's off the board already, not being interested in Javonte Williams, who's kind of the other guy in this range that I'm really not clicking on. So just trying to mix it up, do something different. Brandon Cooks has not yet joined the team. Here's the reversal. You got all the green on the board now. Rounds kind of started in round 7, but 8, 9, and 10 after the kind of wide receiver run here at the beginning of the draft, the first 5, 6 rounds. It's just kind of the way things are going right now. Admittedly, is the way that we prefer to draft, but to the point I think Brian made a few shows ago, we probably need to be more interested in these early running backs that are sliding because of this phenomenon. There's just no way all of these running backs are going to fail at their cost.
Yep, I agree. And we do have Vaporware in the chat. Maybe this was a while ago. I just saw it now. If both healthy, do you think Ridley or Hopkins will finish as a wide receiver 1 on the Titans?
I think Ridley. Obviously, I'm
Yeah.
biased with this team, but I just feel like I'll side with youth and talent there on Ridley's side. Obviously, Hopkins, phenomenal player, but he's starting to enter that range in kind of the wide receiver age-related decline in terms of performance that we need to be concerned about. And I think ADP reflects that, right?
Yeah, I'm on the same page. No one's surprised if DeAndre Hopkins outperforms Calvin Ridley, but yeah, I would bet on Calvin too. Love that Josh Downs pick going late.
I do still need Buffalo correlation with Garrett Wilson, Jacksonville correlation. I think I'm just going to take Trevor Lawrence, even though I wanted Aaron Rodgers. He's a little behind ADP. It's kind of a non-traditional pairing right now with the Tennessee player I have in Calvin Ridley, but I think I straight up like Lawrence to Aaron Rodgers, so I'm okay with that.
Oh yeah, I'll definitely be on Lawrence over him. And we have Chill in the chat too. Favorite sleeper rookie tight ends or non-rookies?
Well, I don't know if he's a sleeper, but we both, I think, are pretty high on this second round draft pick the Commanders had this spring, Chuck, and Ben Sinnott. Caught a ton of balls in college and just feels like the clear tight end 1 for the Commanders as they enter the 2024 season. I'm not necessarily engaging in like lazy analysis that quote unquote rookie quarterbacks just like to lean on the tight end here. It just seems like we got a player that's going to run a lot of routes, going to be on the field a lot, and his draft position seems like it's lagging behind where it probably should be if you do the math out and project like a 15 to 20% target share for a tight end, which is definitely in reason given what he was able to do in his NCAA career. So I think for me, Chuck, it's going to be Ben Sinnott.
I'll let you make your pick before I give you my guy.
Kind of hoping to get Gabe Davis to backstack Trevor Lawrence, but that's okay. Mm-hmm. Worst things have happened. I'm going to go with Marshawn Lloyd. No other reason than highly touted kind of rookie prospect here. I don't have him in my portfolio yet. And then, I think there's contingent value, obviously, if anything happens to Josh Jacobs. But I just have a feeling this is going to be more of a 1A, 1B situation at running back for Marshawn Lloyd and Josh Jacobs than just a straight up Josh Jacobs bell cow situation. So I like the cost here.
Yep. I'm super in on Marshawn. And on that Ben Sinnott note, you got me to click on him so much. I have to avoid clicking on him now because I have way too much of him. But he just seems so easy. And like Brock Bowers, I don't know if he counts, but he could end up being a value. But I've had a hard time because I know Dalton Schultz is good. And
right.
Who's the other guy in the range? Dallas Goedert. Yeah, I think Dallas Goedert's good too. So I'd still rather take those two guys over Brock Bowers. And I wonder how much people are kind of chasing Sam Laporta from last year because he was kind of going a little bit after Brock Bowers even, and obviously finishes tight end 1. Vaporware, I like Sinnott, but he's a love-hate rookie. Some think he will do great. Others think the Commanders reached too early on a possible fullback. My Daniel stack hopes he's good. One other thing I will say that Zach Ertz is on the roster, And so I'm not necessarily expecting Ben Sinnott to start week 1, but I'm hoping he's a starter by week 15, I guess.
I don't know if I still believe in Zach Ertz. Obviously, a tremendously accomplished veteran player, but straight up released by Arizona in the middle of the season last year to elevate Trey McBride and make him their primary tight end, and then no one really prioritized bringing Zach Ertz in until super late in the season. I think when the Lions brought him in the postseason, and then they didn't even activate him. So you're obviously right to bring up what the downside risk is on the Commanders roster at the position, but it's not something I'm worried about at this point. Is really, I guess, all I'm saying.
Oh yeah, I still have way too much Ben Sinnott at this point. And then mentioned earlier, Hayden Hurst, I think, is a guy who's probably like he's not going to go beyond like a 16th round pick, but he's a guy who is getting attention right now, I guess. Jelani Woods, candidate. Maybe he's good at football after missing a full season. Tucker Kraft might be the starter, but I think he's kind of hurt right now, so that has me not clicking on him as much now. It's a few sleeper tight ends. And Vaporware's other comment, the Seahawks' new offensive coordinator could be fun and up-tempo. Think getting the Seahawks skill players is important. I've been trying to draft more Seahawks lately, and a lot of it has to do with their week 15, 16, 17 correlation. I'm drafting a ton of players from whoever that is.
Yeah, no, I'm glad we circled back to this because I agree it's a leak in my portfolio 100%. The player I think I want the most is Tyler Lockett. I feel like this pricing I know he's getting a little older, but I think is somewhat wrong. This feels like free fantasy points around the 100th pick in drafts with Tyler Lockett. So that's probably the receiver I'm most interested in trying to get to more.
Same. And that week 15, 16, 17 is Green Bay, Minnesota, Chicago, of which I have a Green Bay player on like every team, a Minnesota player on most teams, and Chicago player. Like this is for me, Seattle's probably a team that I'm definitely under targeting just because I'm targeting Green Bay, Minnesota, and Chicago so much. I really need to get that. It's just easy correlation, I guess. But
a little bit of chaotic selections, I guess, here at running back. Somewhat of a reach for Jaleel McLaughlin. I think that's about 20 picks ahead of where he normally goes. I got 6 receivers already, so like I don't need to reach too much. I think I'm going to do something I did in the last show and just go with the upside in one of the best offenses in football and take Jalen Wright again here as my 4th running back. Basically right on ADP as well, so
Josh D in the chat, I don't know how so many people are doing these every day. The cheapest one is $25. Well, the cheapest one right now is actually $12. That Superflex that they dropped, the Pugbutt Superflex. And so half of the NFL contests don't show up under the NFL tab, like weekly winners, the marathon, the Superflexes. So you just got to scroll the carousel on the main page. But I mean, I know a $12 Superflex 3-backs isn't quite what you're looking for, if you don't want to draft the $25 price point. I've been missing the puppies. They haven't had like a big puppy. And so I'm missing that like price point in my portfolio right now too.
I wonder if this is truly like out loud speculation, no inside information. I wonder if they're struggling with how to size these because we've talked about how fast these contests are filling. I'm sure that they want to make some of these lower dollar entry, large field tournaments that they're putting together significantly larger in size. But I imagine it's kind of a delicate balance between doing that for customers and then also focusing on the volume of just new contests that they're constantly putting out. I don't think they want as many things as open at the same time because then people won't be entering the other things. So it is kind of interesting from like a business standpoint to think about what Underdog is doing here. There are a lot of people that this is how they prefer to play fantasy football now, relative to or fantasy sports in general now. I think we've seen a little bit of a decline in the participation in some of the competitor spaces in terms of like volume of contests that are available for different sports. Obviously we're here to talk about Underdog, so I don't want to give shine to the other kind of businesses in this space right now, but I'll make a pick here and come back to the point I'm trying to make here. It's just a credit, I think, to Underdog that they're getting this volume of participation in June on season-long drafts. I think I'm just going to go with Bucky Irving, who we seem to talk about every single night, Chuck.
I wasn't going to bring him up today, but since you did, I'm just kidding.
And I feel very good about what I went pretty top heavy with receiver. Like there's a couple of guys I'm still interested in, but like I'm definitely just kind of filling out the roster at this point. I think I'm honestly comfortable with these 5 running backs. Probably going to look for some tight ends and a couple more wide receivers to close out this contest.
Nice. Vapor in chat yesterday, there was a $3 contest, 20 max mini Schnauzer 2 filled in 12 hours. Yeah, I missed it. I didn't even know about it till it was already over. It's insane that that's possible because 20 max, like, that's a lot of people entering, like a lot of like individual people entering that contest.
But it's the easiest place to play fantasy sports right now. The draft, I think, is the main reason a lot of us fell in love with this hobby, if you will, way before kind of these mass kind of paid entry contests kind of came along in the last 10 to 15 years, if you will. So that is, I think, the primary reason Underdog's doing well. Credit to them, but also credit to the breadth of contests that are available. It's obviously not just drafts. It's the pick 'em, higher or lower contests where you can mix and match different stats to build slips with your favorite sport or across sports like MLB, NBA, NFL, and way more. WNBA obviously going on right now. There is the United Football League championship game coming up this weekend. And I guess this is just a good opportunity to do what we're required to do every single show. Mention that we do have a promo code on the screen, Occupy2, if you're not yet playing here on Underdog. First of all, why? For all the reasons I just talked about. And second, start playing today. You can get up to $250 matched on your first deposit using our promo code today of Occupy2. One of the best promo deals we've ever seen in the fantasy sports contest space, Chuck.
Nice. Vapor, there are $10 eliminator and weekly winner contests, but those are better to enter later when we have more information. I completely agree on eliminator. I mentioned last stream how bad it is to have just dead roster spots, guys. Like I was going through my last year's teams. Tim, who's the guy on Denver that didn't play at all?
Tim Patrick towards ACL in the summer.
Yeah. Like you don't want Tim Patrick's on your roster, especially in a contest like eliminator. And then I'll let you make this pick.
Well, I'm biased. I'm a New England guy. ADP's rising a little bit. Probably seems like he's the safest pick in this wide receiver room to produce throughout the season. So I'll take Demario Douglas here.
I loved having him as an anchor for my teams. Yeah. And weekly winners. So I'm like 30 drafts in, but a lot of that has to do with like I can draft weekly winners on my phone and not think about any kind of correlation week 15, 16, 17. And I want to get like some kind of ADP value, some combos I won't be able to get later. So I'm going to do most of my drafts for weekly winners later in the summer. I want to do a stream. I still don't think I've done a stream on weekly winners. Maybe I'll do that this weekend. But just I think it's really fun strategy that hasn't been dived into quite as much as the BBM strategy, and so I think we can find an edge there. Number one edge, I'll say right now, maybe not number one edge, but I'm taking Devin A-Chain every single time he's on the board in the second round, and for weekly winners, it just seems like he should be a first round pick.
Ceiling plays only is basically, it sounds like what your mantra is in weekly winners. Although I guess you're saying you feel like it's a little easier to draft casually if you're just kind of thumbing through options on your phone, purely chasing ADP value. But I really like the mindset there, just thinking about who has a high ceiling, who better than the running back who proved to be the most efficient in the league last year. Obviously, I think there's some regression concerns in general there in like regular fantasy football formats. But over here, where you're not worried about having to set your starting lineup, I think I completely agree and understand your mindset there.
Yeah, and Gabe Davis has been my highest drafted receiver as well, so that part should be fun.
All right. I think I still need another tight end, right? Yeah. So am I going to do it here? What do we got? We got Isaiah Likely, Chig Okonkwo. I think I took Chig on the last show. I think I made the case for him being kind of, again, this sounds super underwhelming. I understand that, but you're looking at a guy who probably should average about 5 to 6 fantasy points per game. I don't really think there's any other tight end on the board at this point that can give you that. And if you get some really good touchdown luck with him in the playoff weeks, all of a sudden he's in your lineup at kind of no cost. Probably should play a ton of snaps, run a ton of routes, And you can't necessarily say that for a lot of players that are getting selected across all positions in this range. So I like him here.
See these guys talking about the other draft sites. Yeah, it's so hard to draft anywhere but Underdog right now because the contests are just not great. Underdog's the only one with good contests. I have 50 slows going in that $2 drafters contest because I cannot be bothered to sit here and draft $2 drafts anymore. But it's really fun. Just kind of have fun with it. Can try anything because it's $2. First place is still 20K, so that's nice. But it just does not compare to anything on Underdog. And what percentage of your drafts have been CMC pick one? I was like 40 drafts into like the BBM rankings without a single number one pick, which was kind of annoying. But I've gotten 2 or 3 in like the last 10, so it kind of evens out.
I had last year outrageous pick luck with the number one pick, which was obviously good for the advance rate with CMC. We'll see. I think I've taken him a couple times. I think I got him in one of the single entry contests that was available over the last month, which obviously that's very good. I mean, you talk about pick variance in that format, super important. Kind of able to just lock in a high floor, at least we hope, right, with a player like Christian McCaffrey. I'm interested to see what the final leaderboards end up looking like for some of those single entry contests, because obviously not as much opportunity for sharp players like yourself, Chuck, to over-index the field. Really no opportunity. I feel like more casual players have a better chance in those single entry, 3-entry max type contests.
Oh yeah, those are the best contests, right? The single entries and 3 entries. Best chance to make the finals anyway.
We talked about the importance of monitoring what you're doing with bye weeks. I took 2 tight ends with the same bye week when I took Chig, so I'm going to have to select another one before we get out of here. I got 2 picks left. I don't really, care for what's here in general, but I'm going to go with Devontae Walker just as kind of like a ceiling play at receiver. Big-bodied receiver that Lamar Jackson allegedly told his front office to go out and get him that he wanted. So I'm going to pay attention to something like that. Elite quarterback like that wants a young rookie on the team. I think he's going to force the issue and make sure this kid has a role. So I'm happy to chase ceiling with Devontae Walker on one of the best offenses in the league.
I mentioned, I think those rookie receivers going in like the Lad McConkey, Keon Coleman range they're a little bit too expensive. I understand we're paying for the upside, so we can still draft them there. But guys like Devontae Walker, I love tacking on Jalen McMillan, and then a little bit earlier than that is Jalen Polk as well, Roman Wilson. Like I'd much rather take shots on these guys that cost. Malachi Corley, who I'm pretty sure Aaron Rodgers talked about he really likes. And even like I haven't taken Javon Baker yet, but I would add him to that list too, I think.
Yeah, I think I took Baker late on the last stream, but he's on the list for me as well. And, we talked about kind of the Patriots having potential to be the worst offense in the league. RIP to my feelings for sure, but very easy to backstack the Patriots as well. That's the flip side there. Justin Watson, can't say I've seen him get selected really ever. So that was kind of fun to watch come off. I got to figure out what I want to do here to not completely take a 0 at tight end in week 5. That is basically the last decision that I have available here. Jatavian Sanders is a rookie here with the Panthers. Hayden Hurst completely off the roster there. Maybe by ADP, he's considered the best option. You've kind of had me a little more interested in Tucker Kraft. I've already got 2 Green Bay Packers, so I don't think I want to go there. I think we have the decision here between Theo Johnson and Daniel Bellinger for the Giants. Darren Waller did officially announce his retirement from the NFL for the Giants. He won't be playing this year. So we have pretty good sense that it's definitely going to be one of these 2 guys. I just don't know which one is the right one. I think I will go with the upside with Theo Johnson just because I think we kind of have a sense for what the ceiling is with Daniel Bellinger, but we don't necessarily know that yet with Theo Johnson. And look, I'm talking about my 3rd tight end on my roster. I'm not counting on Theo Johnson to do a tremendous amount for me, but if I am getting a player that differentiates me from the field, if he ends up having an outsized role in the Giants offense, if the Giants offense is better than expected in the passing game, probably means that Drew Lock is playing and not Daniel Jones. That's neither here nor there. Theo Johnson seems like a pretty, safe, high-risk selection here in the last round of drafts.
I like it. Yeah, and going back to that sleeper tight end question, like that Giants room is definitely in there. You mentioned Tavion Sanders, another rookie who I think could. I mean, he should be the starter in Carolina, right? Hopefully, Bryce Young is better. And Tucker Kraft, yeah, I think those are all fine last round tight end picks. I like them all.
So pretty happy with what we did here. Kind of I got a lot of correlation up and down the lineup, primarily with Jalen Hurts, Dallas Goedert, and Brandon Cooks in week 17, as well as kind of a reverse Trevor Lawrence with each of Chiga Conquo and Calvin Ridley in week 17 as well with Tennessee and Jacksonville, and some week 15 and 16 correlations along the way. We'll see, obviously by the time we get to the season, how all the teams shake out, but I believe a 2-5-8-3 build for me. I'll get that up on the screen here. Pretty much happy with any roster that just like structure wise looks like this by the end of any draft for me, Chuck.
No, I like it. Yeah, this was a good one this morning.
Cool. I appreciate you joining me as always, Chuck. I don't believe that we have a formal schedule for our next Underdog NFL draft that we're going to be doing on the show here. Mentioned that single entry draft where I got the number one pick to Christian McCaffrey. That was the $35 Greyhound. That was a couple of weeks ago. And that was a similar build. 2592 for me there. Went a little lighter at running back because I had McCaffrey, which seems to make sense. Another Jalen Wright team for me. I guess you're starting to see all my favorite players and who they are. Obviously, a little bit of a sidebar here for me, but I just thought this was a cool contest. I hope to see more contests like this as we go through the rest of the spring and summer. Underdog just doing a great job just filling our timelines with different options. And I mentioned all of these kind of higher or lower options, WNBA, MMA. Obviously, that's something that we talk about a lot on this channel. Brian and Jake do a lot of great MMA content for you daily fantasy players, but some of the things they talk about applicable to these streets as well. We've got tennis. I believe we have European World Soccer coming up, esports for those of you that are into that. Like, there's just the breadth of options here is just absolutely incredible, and it's why we're proud to be partnered with this company because they're really one of the best innovators in the space right now.
Oh yeah,
Chuck, unless you have anything else, I think we're going to get out of here and let everybody else enjoy their days. If you guys like the mid-afternoon, early morning time slot for catching the show live, give us a thumbs up, leave a comment. Maybe we'll mix in some more of those throughout the rest of the summer here because we've largely been drafting evenings, like around dinner time or later on this channel. But we're happy to mix it up and see what works for you guys. Other than that, Chuck, thank you as always for making yourself available to be on the show.
Hey, thank you. And I want to shout out Vaporware and Josh D for showing up in the chat today. Appreciate you guys.
Yeah, this has been one of the more active kind of live chats we've had in a couple of weeks. I get it. It's still very early in the draft process, so we still expect kind of more to happen there. But as kind of we've been saying, thank you guys for watching. I'm going to end the stream here, and we will talk to you guys on this channel tomorrow evening. There will be a live stream for Game 4 of the NBA Finals. We are, for those of you who really love the NBA, unfortunately expecting that to be the last game of this particular NBA season. But Chuck, all will be well in basketball land because then we get a chance to talk about NBA Summer League, which I know will be something that we talk about on this channel as well. I know that you're excited about as well. So for Chuck, I'm Chris. Thank you everybody for watching. We'll see you tomorrow to talk about Game 4 in the NBA Finals.